5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Watch me. Level up, level up, level up, level up, level up, level up.
It was my senior year and I was a communications and media studies. I had an undergrad in Hispanic marketing and I attended Florida State University. At the time I was actually slated. I had a couple of job offers already under my belt. And I was thinking that I was gonna actually go ahead and take a job for Bacardi under the Ciroc label and go work there. When a recruiter reached out to me and said a lot about my background, was very enticing, and he'd like to meet me, and I ignored it because I'd never heard of Teach for America. But when I ended up going to the recruitment event itself, he spoke a lot about the hardships that kids had, you know, like, oh, they're doing their homework without electricity, or you know, the kids come from impoverished backgrounds. He was just saying all these stories that really moved the people that were around me. However, because I shared that same backstory, it really didn't move me whatsoever. I wasn't impressed, just to be honest. And after the event, the recruiter came up to me and said, "You must have really gone through some tough stuff." And I laughed at him and I said, "Yeah, like I grew up the same way that you're describing these students, and I don't feel any kinship to return and teach." So he gave me the fabulous line of, "If not you, then who? If not now, then when?" Which I then rolled my eyes to because I was just not ready to return to Miami and return into the neighborhoods that I had grown up in. So by that response, he just told me, if not you, then how are we gonna actually make this change and end educational inequity? If people like you who share the background of the kids that we're trying to transform and change don't step into the classroom, then how are we ever going to actually make this movement rise? And it really gave me a lot to think about. I applied that evening, I went through the process, and here I am today.
I'd always liked the idea of teaching, never saw myself as a teacher, and I just decided to go for it. And I think 8 years later, it was a pretty great decision. What really got me excited was reflecting on my high school experience. I loved high school. It really was some of the best time of my life. I was involved with everything. I loved my teachers. I had a great group of friends. And knowing that I could be a part of someone else's great experience is what really led me to want to do it. I had such an amazing, great time and met so many people that shaped my future, that knowing that I could be a part of, you know, at this point, over 1,000 kids and their futures just became really exciting and enticing for me. And it's kind of what's brought me into it and what's kept me around.
My sister did Teach for America in 2010, another school here in Miami, and she encouraged me to apply and just like bombarded me with a lot of different messages, like, you have to apply, you have to apply. And truth be told, I had no idea what Teach for America was. I was just like, oh, my sister is doing it, and I guess this is something I probably should look into. In college, I was very involved. I was the president of the Hispanic Student Association. I was also involved with a lot of other things on campus. So I had a natural affinity, I'd like to think, to mentoring other people. And a recruiter reached out to me a similar way. And I sat down with the recruiter and I told her why I like mentoring people. And she connected it to Teach for America's mission of closing the achievement gap. And I was hooked, partly because of that and also partly because of my sister encouraging me. And I went through the application process, but as soon as I went through the application process, I saw that they were taking it really seriously. Every step was one layer of trying to see, are you a right fit for this program? Like, do you see yourself teaching children for the long haul, or if in the short term, like, what is your purpose? And I truthfully would not be here had it not been for Teach for America, because I just want to have stayed in education. I would have gone through the foreign service route, which is something I decided that I wanted to do. But once I stepped into my classroom, I just fell in love with it. And so I'm here. Yeah. I get this question quite often since now I'm on staff, and that's part of what we do. We coach core members around this so-called leadership idea. And I'm not gonna lie, back in the day, I was like, this is very fluffy. Like, I don't really understand this. I don't really buy into this because it just seems all theoretical. And as I've learned more about what it means to be a leader, partly from my own experiences, partly from engaging in grad school, and then also engaging in Teach for America's development philosophy, I've realized that like leadership is an act of understanding not only yourself, but how you impact others. And those others are students here at Miami-Dade. So if you're willing to put yourself on the line every day, if you're willing to put yourself in a position to not only challenge yourself, but grow, I consider you a leader, right? And it's such a complex question, but I think at the end of the day, a leader is someone who's willing to rise to a challenge where you're needed. And that's how I define it.
So this is a very loaded question, but honestly, I answered that question through my teaching. When I first heard of teachers and teaching through leadership, it was a very confusing concept. But I actually learned what teaching through leadership was when I became the leader of my classroom. And it honestly was empowering my kids to move forward with or without me. And it takes a lot of witness and knowing yourself and having that relationship and trust with your students and understanding the community in order to truly help not just yourself, but your students rise above and actually make a difference. And I think that in order to teach with leadership, it goes beyond the four walls of your classroom. In order to truly be a teacher leader, you have to be impacting the kids enough for them to be able to take that impact outside. I truly believe it's all about impacting the child, who will then impact the community and hopefully one day the world.
Institute, you're going to hear a lot of different stories about it. I absolutely loved Institute. I loved Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had an amazing time. And Institute really was just an eye-opener for me. The idea of students not understanding negative numbers just blew my mind straight off the bat. And I thought jumping in, being a math teacher, I'm good at math, this is going to be easy. And it really humbled me and took me back a step to make me focus on what the deeper issues were so that I'd be able to actually get my students onto grade level. My CMA, Christina, was actually really fantastic. Keep in touch with her to this day. Really, every step of the way would be there to help us through all the lows and give us the feedback when we needed to really make a difference. During my years in the Corps, the best professional development or the best critique I ever got was a 15-20 minute video that my instructional coach took of me. And she kept telling me that I was a boring teacher, and I'm not a boring person. So I couldn't believe that I was a boring teacher. And she took this video of me, made me watch it. 2 minutes into it, I was like, I hate this is awful, let's turn it off. She's like, nope, if your students have to sit through this every other day for 90 minutes, you need to watch yourself for this entire time. And that was really one of the best things I ever saw, because it was a true reflection of what I was doing, and it allowed me to kind of change up what I was doing. So then after my 5 years of teaching, I became an instructional coach. So I was still technically a teacher, but I had no classes, and my job was to facilitate teacher learning. I would work with 2 to 3 teachers at a time for a 2 to 3 week span where I would put them on a coaching cycle. That could be anywhere from content help to planning to classroom management. And it was really tailored for whatever a teacher needed. And because I had no classes, I could spend the whole day with them and help them with anything they needed within the school. We also have this really great thing where I get to take my mentees off campus twice a year. So I got to take them to 2 different schools where they got to see different teachers, different students, different everything. And that's a really great practice to get into, because you kind of see what everyone else is doing outside of your building, and it really opens up your eyes.
As an MTLD, essentially like a coach for new teachers. I am the person who is the primary contact point for Corps members during their 2-year experience. And I've also learned that iterations of what it means to be this quote unquote MTLD coach, it's gone through a lot of changes over the years. So the way I experience coaching in my region has shifted to what I do with Corps members currently. And it makes me excited to talk about it because there's a lot of differences. My first year, I also came in like super high achieving, I'd like to think. And like, I was like, oh, I'm okay. Like, I'm gonna be great. and then I struggled like everyone does. And I held on to this like perfectionist idea of like who I was, and I didn't seek help. So I think like as an orientation for anyone coming in, I think it's important to reach out to others, and it's okay to be vulnerable. You're not expected to be a robot nor perfect. So I would say that's like one orientation as a coach that I realize that is important for people coming in. And on the flip side, it's like our promise to core members, like what do we promise as support? And I would say like in our region currently, we have 3 different models just for my role. The first is what we call high density, which is like I see this core member every week, sometimes twice a week. And then the other model is individual coaching, which is a little bit more spaced out. I'll see a particular core member every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what their goal is. And then the last model is a professional learning community, where like a core member will participate in a group with other core members and learn something. All 3 are opted into. So basically it just depends on what the choice is of a core member and what they need most, what's most relevant to them. But that's what I can speak to. I was working with a core member until 7 yesterday. So just know that like MTLDs, at least I can speak to our region, are very committed to like their role. Yeah, I think Frank elevated an example that was really, really helpful. There are a number of different ways that you challenge teachers. I think one way that I've learned is helping teachers arrive to their own conclusions by presenting data to them. I think that could be like a video, for example, that they asked me to record of them. It could be like observational, anecdotal information, like how are teachers interacting with students, like the type of interactions. Are they interacting more with males or females, or Black students, Latinx students, white students? There are a plethora of different ways that I coach core members around by collecting data, and I facilitate the space where core members are able to reflect on that, and also question like what they're doing to really reach into their what we call a vision, which is like what they see to be what they want to be true for their classroom. So I enjoy these conversations. I would say like most of my core members, if not all, are just very reflective as it is. But yeah, that's part of the process, just engaging in reflection.
My journey has been a bit interesting. I was an ESOL teacher. I taught English to speakers of other languages. So really my support was home-based from my TFA mentor, who was also the other ESOL teacher at school. And I mean, he supported me through my understanding of how to craft classroom management, all the way up to how to deliver content in a way that allowed me to step away from using Spanish in the classroom, it's really interesting, right? Because I didn't have an education background, so I assumed, well, I'm Latinx and I will have a majority of Latinx students, and therefore I can be a bilingual teacher. But you know, through his support, I was able to see that there were more than just Latinx students. I would have actually loved to have had Xavier as my MTLD back then, because I realized that I was not helping out my Haitian Creole students, and I was definitely like not helping out my kids who were from Saudi Arabia at the time. So he allowed me to actually be vulnerable and reflect and try to hone in on my strengths. I stopped using Spanish like my 4th day in the classroom. Because of his support and his help. And he literally is now the co-founder of 2 of my businesses that I have at this point, that have spun out because of my teacher leadership. And without him, I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at as a teacher, as an educator, as a fighter for equity in schools, and just on a personal level. Something that I will say about the support that you receive from TFA, it usually comes best from everyone who's in your core. Like, you build bonds and you become a family if you truly allow yourself to be vulnerable and grow throughout this experience. And that is one of the things I'm most grateful for.
My first year at North Miami was the second year that they had Teach for America teachers. So we had 7 second years when I got there, and we were 9 first years. 5 of us were in the math department, and 4 of us didn't bond right away. We still make fun of one of them. But 4 of us really got together and became each other's support. We didn't teach the same thing the first year. So it wasn't just content help, but to have someone that knew the kids, to have someone who knew the coaches, to have someone who knew parents, knew admin. It made our lives a lot easier to get around the school and kind of the mini universe that it is. You know that you can go down the hall and when you're frustrated, have that conversation with someone. When you had a great win, share it right away. And it really made being at work a lot easier. I was there for 5 years. Some of them were there for 6 years. Out of the 4 of us, 3 of us are still teaching. So that made it, really great. I went to 2 of their weddings, and they're people that are some of my best friends down here in South Florida.
Success in the classroom looks it has so many different ways that it can come to be. One of the biggest successes that I've experienced in the classroom is, like I stated earlier, what I truly believe teacher leadership is, and it's for kids to take ownership and empowerment for themselves. So for me, success, my first year was literally, it looked like if I leave the classroom to go to the bathroom, it won't erupt into chaos. And to me, I felt like that was success because the kids were invested in what they were learning and they were invested in the relationship and rapport they had felt with me and truly trusted and respected me enough to continue the work without me being in the classroom. I felt like when I achieved that, it was a prom. But looking at the long scheme of things, I think success truly means for kids to be taking ownership of themselves, of their actions, and of their learning. It was like a huge shift that happened after my 3rd year teaching, where my teaching style changed, where I stopped, quote unquote, being the sage on the stage. I did a lot of group work, but then it turned into, what do you guys want to learn? Bring it to the table. And it really turned into a partnership between me and my kids. And it truly transformed the way that I taught. It transformed the way that they learned. And it really challenged me as an educator to no longer be the one in charge, to be the one to accept input from the kids themselves and see them thrive. And due to that, they were able to advocate for themselves in ways that I never was able to, even if I tried. It just literally looks like a kid becoming an outstanding part of the community. I mean, kids are walking out of schools now based on things that they truly and honestly believe in. It's kids being able to walk into jobs and understanding the current political climate in the country, understanding their role in the community and how they can make a change. I literally think that success is when a kid is ignited and feels that same amount of energy as the teacher does in the classroom to move them forward in life.
Jumping off of something Leiva said, it's not just what success in your classroom, but it's when the students take your skills or care about other classes as much as they care about yours. There's nothing more frustrating than when you hear a kid say, oh, but I'm good in this person's class. It's like, no, I want you to be good in all 8 of your classes. I want you to want to be good in all 8 of your classes. And having taught students and been in the school with them from freshman to senior year and helped them with college applications, it's so cool to see that like little meek freshmen coming in, they didn't know what they want to do with their lives. Now they're coming up to you like, hey, I need a letter of recommendation for college. And it's elating to really see that growth, to see that they're going after their true dreams. On LinkedIn, I just got a message from one of my students from my first year of teaching. She graduated from FIU with a bachelor's in business administration. And she just wanted to let me know that she made it and she's successful. And that was a completely unexpected thing to see, and it just really made my day. And now what's weird is some of these kiddos that are graduating, it's like, hey, why don't you look into Teach for America? You'd be a prime candidate, come on back. And it's weird to think that I can now work with someone that I taught. Weird, but like a great circle.
Classroom culture is probably the most important thing that a core member can develop for students and for themselves in their classroom. I truly believe that if a core member doesn't prioritize that, it becomes complicated for them to really make the impact they want to make. And with that being said, that could be like a daunting statement to make, but I just want to be fully transparent about what it takes to be successful in a classroom. And that's multifaceted as well. Like, You have to take into account where students come from, their backgrounds. You have to take into account like how you're showing up every day, even if you're tired. You have to keep in mind the rituals that you're ending your classroom with, you're starting the day with. So those are some concrete practices, both at like the personal level, the teacher level, but also concrete at the classroom level that I would say like I've seen. I also think from our end, how I develop classroom culture and management, or I help core members see how they can develop it. I ground it in literature, so we have different texts that we use. One being Teach Like a Champion. So I use that with like a caveat. Sometimes like every text you're going to encounter isn't fully well-rounded. But what I do like about this literature is that it's very specific and direct about what you can develop as a practitioner in the classroom. So I'm working with core members currently on classroom management. And there are specific techniques. There's like at least, I think like 50. But like I help core members prioritize which techniques they need in the classroom in order to establish one, management, but then two, culture. For example, I have a core member that I was working with today that the students just don't listen to the teacher, and that produces the teacher's like anxiety. They're like, I planned this awesome lesson, like my students just won't listen to me. And it's every teacher has gone through this challenge at some point as a first year teacher. So one, I normalize that experience, but two, I ground it in. There's actually something missing in your teacher practice that if you're implementing could really smooth over some things. So let's first start with the technique 34, which is called 100%. So we can get everyone with you before you're speaking, because it's important to send a signal that it's what you're saying is gold, right? Everyone has to listen. So let's create your attention getter. Like, how do you get everyone's attention? And then once you have 100% of attention, let's move on to the next technique, which is what to do, technique 35. And let's get very specific about how to orient students to what they need to be thinking about, what they need to be like using in voice level, and what they need to be doing with their bodies. So brain, body, voice, we call it. And then once we master that, then we continue to move on to different techniques. But all these little pieces are like an orchestra. So once you put them together, your classroom culture will flourish. But it takes a while. It takes time. And that's what I normalize for core members, but also ground in concrete practices.
Teach Like a Champion is also the district resource that we use. So I was using that book as a coach, and I just passed it on to the new coach who took my position. So TFA uses it, Miami-Dade County Public School uses it, and some great stuff. It's funny because Xavier was saying a lot of techniques. The last one that we were working on, I forget what it was called. I think it was in the 50s. It was setting your intention. So start at the beginning of the class, state what you're going to do, and make sure you have 100% focus. And what's cool about the instructional coach that's school-based is I could be with you for all 3 of your periods with the day and debrief with you right after. I'm there in the morning, I'm there after. I know your kids. I was with them last year. I'll be with them next year. So it adds just another level of support from what Teach for America is able to give you. And what's great about having both of those is that you can reflect on each other using your different people. If one person's really great at content and one's helping you with management, you now have 2 people that are kind of your champions coming in to help you. I've found the more that a core member trusts me and my vision, the more that they kind of get out of it. And at the end of the day, I care about the students. So I want to see what's best for the students. And as long as we're in alignment with that, that's when teachers really get their best results.
You really gain a lot of context after your first year. Your first year is like learning how to walk. And once you know how to walk, it's something you can't really undo. So in terms of supporting the core members that were behind me, I supported them a lot with classroom management and classroom culture. I actually had very, very strong classroom management and culture simply because I was myself. I was not afraid to be myself in the classroom, which is very interesting when it comes to advice. As a first year teacher, you will get advice from everyone and their mom because they truly want you to succeed, because they truly want to help out the kids. But the first advice I gave all of them was, you need to shut all of that out and figure out who you are and who you want to be in the classroom, and then start using all the pieces that are given to you from all these valuable players that want to build you up and help you succeed in order to truly be able to be you in the classroom. So, for example, the examples that Xavier gave and Frank gave on Teach Like a Champion, I use those in my classroom. I do snappy practice. I do a lot of those techniques, but I do them my way in order to make them work for me. And what ends up happening a lot is based on the videos that are given, they are the best resource ever. Like, you can watch the DVDs and you can see people actually going through classrooms, but it's not until you see yourself. It's what Frank was saying, like, what do I look like asking my kids for 100%? What does my callback have to do with me? And like, when you don't feel like that is the technique that works for you, the kids know it immediately. They can read through you like a book. They know you better than you know yourself. And it's literally like, yo, take a weekend, reflect, who are you? Who do you want to be? And how will that help your kids? That truly will make all of these things click. So for me, I was kind of like the district / TFA whisperer, in the sense that for the first year, I would literally help them process everything that was coming their way. Because what people don't understand is you are given all these resources, but you have no time to act. And it's literally like, thank you for this resource. I have 20 kids in my classroom in 1 hour. What do I do? So I was really that person that they could bounce those ideas off of, practice with, and someone who isn't an administrator can just be in their classroom and help. I was literally the person who would suggest to them, maybe try this, or come watch me, come watch how I use technique number 34. For them to see like a completely different person trying it out, really made it different. And it's also like I added the context of my school, of my administration, of our everyday life that truly made it usable.
I would say like really be grounded in like why you're doing what you're doing. It's really easy to get lost in the daily hustle, the daily tasks that you have to do. It's easy to get lost. And I often find that even though a lot of my work is technical and developing skill in core members, I've noticed that the core members that are very successful are the ones that have practices that ground them in who they are, and also like are able to lift themselves out of a rut because they have practices of self-care. So that would be my biggest advice.
Definitely completely echo that. And then the big thing that I always tell my first year teachers is your locus of control. When you come into a situation, what can you change and what can't you change? There are some things that you can come in and it'll be fixed in a second. There are some things that you come in and you see are wrong that you have no control over. What you have no control over, you have no control over. Walk away from that. Do the best of what you can with what you have, and don't let those other things kind of drain you and bring you down, because then you won't be able to get done what you can get done. And bend like a willow.
Straight up, protect your energy. And what I mean by that is legit, you need to be careful who you let around you. There are a lot of people, whether they are your close friends, whether they are family, whether they are colleagues in TFA, whether they are colleagues in your school who are not TFA, who are very negative in the educational realm, and they may not mean to be negative, but truly those people will hurt you in the long run. A flower grows best in sunlight, not in shade. So if you hear any shade, if you're experiencing any shade, protect yourself from that. Step away, stay grounded in gratitude, and focus on the positive and silver linings that you have. There is a lot of great things that are happening to you, your kids, and your classrooms. And if you truly focus on that, you will excel and succeed. But if you join the pity party of the I don't have, I wish I had, things would be different if true change would never, ever come to you and the people who think in that manner. So just please, please, please protect your mindset, protect your energy, protect yourself, because in the long run, it'll be what's best for you and what's best for the kids.